Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
I'm George-Affleck.
On tap today, no gas, towers, Bitcoin, tariffs, GST, buying boats.
Too much to spin on UnSpun.
You nailed it.
Oh, yeah. Hey, natural gas. Can we start there? That just came out last
Yeah,
night.
yes.
Like in
Okay, lay
Vancouver.
lay it down. Lay it down first so people know the backstory here.
Well, a lot of things happened. A lot of things happened that are so typical and not typical. So this is in Vancouver, where there was a vote to rescind a decision by the council that I was on many years ago to not allow natural gas to be installed in new homes in Vancouver, high rises, that kind of stuff. I opposed it way back in the day because I thought it was, unrealistic. My argument, and it's still the argument today, is that I don't think we have enough hydro to manage the future, and natural gas is quite efficient as a gas. It's quite clean, if we can call it that, as a gas, and uh,
Compared to coal.
compared to coal, which is quite often what happens, as a result, where we actually quite often will use natural gas to create electricity. Plus, affordability wise, if you talk about affordability in the city, I'm sorry, natural gas is much cheaper than electricity to heat your home and heat your water and run your washing machine, all these different things it's
Everything.
possible to do.
Plug in your car.
There are so many different things that we can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Vancouver than natural gas. It's such a spin of the city trying to do something. I thought
How
Dylan
dare you hate the
Kruger.
planet so much,
I know,
George?
I don't. I am the
No, I
greenest.
mean that as like
I know
that
it's
was a joke.
no,
I was
no.
not
Of
coming. I
course, I
was
know, but that's
I
what I
was
get.
kidding.
That is what people say. That is why this argument. That's why this issue. And the reason what happened last night, so they had hundreds of people show up, of course, saying natural gas is evil, natural gas is evil. And if you make your decisions based on just the people showing up at a council meeting, you are not doing your job as a council. You have to weigh out. It's like the plastic ban is a bunch of BS as well, because how many plastic bags are you buying now to deal with your garbage? About the same many you would have got, but you're only using them once. It's such a bunch of BS. It just drives me crazy, this stuff. Like, instead, why not focus on the roofs of the towers in older buildings downtown, properly insulate them or make them green, and the amount of greenhouse gas emissions we'd reduce in our city if we mandated that every building, every old building in the city needed to find a way to make its roof less leaky. It doesn't even compare to what we're talking about with natural gas. It's ridiculous. And it's something that the city can actually do quickly. And it's just a bunch of waste of time and just virtual signal. And that's kind of what the mayor said in his argument. And people are attacking him for that, but it's not going to do what they think it's going to do for the city. And Dylan Kruger, to his credit, and he's a city councilor in Delta, said, stay in your lane, Vancouver. Like, focus on what you can actually do immediately and for the people to keep it affordable. This is not going to make Vancouver more affordable, that's for sure.
And not more durable in these times where, frankly, climate change is having a huge impact. Big windstorm, power goes out. Guess what still works? Your natural gas. You can still heat your home. You can still cook on your barbecue. You can still cook and heat your house if you need to using your gas stove. You can still boil water without electricity. I mean, we are so reliant on this one thing that we're already working in a deficit of. And listen, I have every reason, like you do, to want to create a better world for our children. We do have children and worry about their future and look around and futures in your but look around and you see these massive storms happening. Like, it's already here. It is happening. Will stopping natural gas, which, by the way, is a resource that we sell in this province,
That's right.
to create an economy, does it actually do us any good on a grand scale? Does it move the meter at all in fixing, like you said, virtue signaling? That's what bothers me, is because nowhere in this conversation, George, and this is the unspun piece for this mushy middle person. I'm pointing at myself for you that are just listening to our podcast. Thanks for listening, by the way. Why not somewhere in the middle? Why not somewhere in the middle? Why not say, you know what? Like you said, we're going to fix the old buildings. We're going to update them and move them into a situation that's better. New builds will be predominantly clean energy based. Instead of saying none of this, ban that, clean energy based. And in the meantime, we have the resources because you don't want to create a situation where gas is
Mhm.
is scarce because then it's going to get more expensive. I mean, and frankly, I don't think this town can take more expensive in any other lane. Like we're there now. But again, I come back to the storms. We are having bigger storms, bigger issues, bigger problems with the movement of electricity and the access to
Mhm.
electricity. And I'm going to end this rant on, and when we don't have enough electricity, which currently we're running at a deficit, we buy it from the United States, which is predominantly
Mhm.
coal. So if
Ding,
we
ding.
actually had our natural gas in place, we wouldn't need to buy that
Yeah.
coal burnt energy. Like it's
You
kind of
want
like, and I'm going to piss off a whole bunch of vegans here, George. Here I'm going to piss off the vegans. The
oh
vegans who are
God.
not eating any kind of meat because they are here for the climate emergency and they are doing their part and then they hop on their private jet. And one flight,
Yeah, yeah.
one flight
Hmm.
offsets a year of being a vegan. Okay, so why not somewhere in the middle? Be veggie centric and travel less.
That's right. Well, and speaking of travel, if you really, really, really want to make a huge difference on greenhouse gas emissions in our region, public transportation. When we put the Canada line in, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the city, I mean, how many? I think 30,000 cars a day were reduced to coming into our city. If you really want to make a difference, start lobbying for that. Get the
Yeah,
Canada line built, or the Expo line, or whatever line it is, to UBC as soon as possible. Get the lines
whatever
built
it
to
is.
North Van, Vancouver. Stop people driving over Lionsgate Bridge. Stop that. There's some greenhouse gas emissions we can get rid of. These are things that we can do within 3 years that will reduce the amount of gas being pumped out of by cars a
Yeah, big
significant
time.
amount. Do those two
Or
things as a
or
city.
you know what
Fight
we
for
can do,
those.
or we can do, George, is, and I have come a long way. What episode are we on?
263, I think, or four?
Lots. Too
73?
many.
I lost track.
Many. But I was like, I don't like towers. You've brought me around. I want livability. I prefer gentle density over massive buildings. Like there's so many, but
Mhm.
you know what? Here we are. There are people living on the street, living in doorways, living in their cars, living hours away from where they work. We don't have the workforce here in Vancouver because everybody lives in Chilliwack or, White Rock or friggin' Squamish. Like everybody's like coming in. You want to reduce gas emissions? Give people a place to live close to where they work. And the NIMBYs right now, I do not consider myself a NIMBY. I'm a bit of a YIMBY, like a yes in my backyard. I want rental apartments. I want,
Mhm.
people to be able to live here. Do I want it to be back to back towers? No. But I live in a city and we have to come around to that. And the tower argument is it's just heating up. I'm on a couple of community groups. I mean, I'm not on Facebook a lot, but holy
Yes,
Hannah, George, these people
you
are
are.
crazy about these towers. Like they're crazy about it.
So there's that new development that got came out this week for up in Alma, like sort of West 10th, for those who don't know Vancouver, sort of towards UBC.
Yeah.
There's an old Safeway site there, and their density they're putting there is quite high dense, but it's only 6, 8 stories high, which is fine. Okay, that maybe makes sense there, because out at UBC they're building tons of towers. So at that point, there will be a train station though, probably at Alma. So 10 years down the road, you'll be like, oh, we should put more towers there. But there's lots of room for more density in that area.
Yes.
But then if you look at Broadway, which we've talked about a lot, and Broadway Corridor, which is the second biggest business district right now in the province, next to downtown Vancouver, the Corridor, which is basically
Yeah.
from Main Street to
Maine.
Oak Street, is
Yeah.
or to Granville Street, sorry, is the second densest business, most used business district because of the hospitals and the
Yeah.
schools, all that stuff. So you have this major healthcare district, and it's on the point. If you don't know Vancouver, it kind of lies along this thing that it's not obstructing most views. It's kind of on the top of a hill, below it is, townhouses and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and it's not going to obstruct anybody's views. And so and it's on the new SkyTrain line. So it makes sense that you should put towers there. Where it makes sense and make logical sense, do the towers, get the density, and look what's happening at Kids Point with that First Nations development.
Okay,
That's
before you swap
yeah.
to Kids Point, I want to stick with Broadway because people
Yes, the big
get all of them all mixed
protest.
up into one big ball. So
Yeah.
for the interest of UnSpun, what you just said about the Broadway plan, right? The Broadway
Yeah.
plan, which is
Mhm.
predominantly between Main Street and Granville Street,
Yeah.
the majority of it. And there are some obvious towers that continue on down to Arbutus, where right now the Arbutus or the Broadway line, that
Mhm.
subway, ends at Arbutus. It ultimately will go all the way to UBC.
It's
How it gets
business
there, who
case.
knows? Like
So,
it's a no-brainer that that's going to happen. But people who, and I'm really going to tap into your George-Affleck, former Vancouver City Councilor brain, because I legitimately don't know how to answer this to people who freak out about how dare we have towers and it's going to upzone and everything's going to get so expensive. And there's this pearl clutching where it's like what you just said about eventually where it's going to go. Like, you should have more towers there because eventually more people are going to move through there. We look at UBC, the densification at UBC is astonishing and functional, and it's
Mhm.
green and it's beautiful and people love it and it's walkable and it makes sense. Like, but when you looked at that plan before it actually happened, people are like, oh, we can't have that many towers in UBC. It's going to
Yes,
ruin the
UBC, of
forest.
course, and UBC is exempt from any kind of city planning
Yeah.
process, as is Kids.
But people were freaking, how will we get
Yeah.
all the cars there? Somehow we did. Okay.
That
So
looks right.
on the Broadway plan, when somebody's freaking out that it won't actually create any type of affordability, ultimately, it's only going to make everybody's properties worth more as everybody does their land assemblies and sells and up zones and everything's a tower and we're all going to hell in a handbasket. What do you say to those people?
Well, I think you have to first make your decision about what is Vancouver as the main city in this province. It requires a certain amount of business development. You need lots of things happening, not just people living here. Not as we were becoming a suburb of the suburbs over the last 30 years because we weren't building enough projects where that people could work. So what happens is and Broadway's mostly the density along Broadway is mostly work related,
Yeah, it's
but it
commercial.
also will be a mixture. There is a requirement for a certain number of rental housing. So it's a real mixture, and that's how it works. When you talked earlier about, and if you look at these places like Chilliwack and Abbotsford and Langley, they're building these communities where you can live, work, and play in the same area. You don't have to get in your car anymore. Everybody's doing it now. Then Vancouver was Yaletown being one of the first planned communities where you built that kind of live, work, and play kind of mentality with high density in that
Yeah.
case. This is a methodology that works. So we're building the Broadway Corridor because it's an important business district of our region, and that has to continue. So finding places to live is crucial, but also it's on a train line, so you can take a train to Brentwood to all the way to New Westminster in what, 40 minutes
Yeah.
from Broadway and Granville. You'll be able to get to New Westminster in 40 minutes on the train, which you can then live in your apartment and pay half the price you would in the city of Vancouver. And so now we're creating a regional strategy as well. So we're not only creating a density and all this stuff happening in the city of Vancouver, we're providing an ability for people who can't afford to live in the city of Vancouver, who didn't buy 30 years ago like you and me,
Yeah.
to be able to buy and live and then get to work and go home and have their life. Otherwise we're not prosperous. We'll just be a dying city like many cities in the United States are, because they built their entire culture around cars, which is just impossible. You look at Seattle, you try to drive through Seattle with their 12-lane highways, it doesn't work. They're just starting to build their transportation now. It's crazy.
And I think something that you said off the top of that is really important is that we grand we air quotes in Vancouver, because both you and I live in the city of Vancouver, we're largely becoming a suburb of the suburbs because the suburbs have grown up because they don't have all of the NIMBYism that we have and the layers of bureaucracy that have come into play. And someone's going to come at me because it's like public consultation, it's necessary. Of course it is. Of course it is. But look around. Look how, I mean, I remember driving out Oak Street Bridge and looking at Richmond 15 years ago because like a family in Tawasin live in Vancouver, and I would drive back and forth down the 99 multiple times a day sometimes. And
Mhm.
for decades now, it has been a sea of cranes. Building, 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 building. Gentle density, not super tall buildings. Because when you look east to Burnaby, you cross Boundary Road and it is a sea of super towers because that's what
Mhm.
that city's want. You go to New Westminster, you mentioned New West. When was the last time people have been downtown New Westminster? You should go check it out. It's grown up. It's grown up nice. It's
Yeah,
grown up
I was at
driving through
Metrotown the other
Surrey.
day. I was at Metrotown the other day, and I
Yeah.
hadn't been walking through Metrotown, like not the mall, outside the mall.
Yeah.
It was all lit up for. I was like, "What? Where am I? This is cute."
Right.
There's all
Where
these
did these trees come
restaurants,
from?
and there's trees, and
Somebody
there's
planted a
lights.
tree.
It's
Right.
really nice, and
Yeah.
there's towers above me. Oh my God!
Oh
Towers.
my God. You know what then? But the thing that when I'm talking with the NIMBYs, and again, I'm always looking for the middle because I get it. If you and your family have lived in that house on that street in a single family situation for 75 years, and you don't want down the street and around the corner there to be a tower. I don't understand why you don't, but I get it. Change is hard.
Mhm.
Change is hard. But maybe the city has grown up too much for you to continue to live in the city because there was a time, and I lived here when I was a little I lived just down the road from where my parents brought me home from the hospital. I remember little sleepy teeny tiny low rise Vancouver. I remember it. It's gone. It's gone, but it's not, protectionism isn't going to help it. It's gone. The buildings that
Well,
have existed before are
selfish.
crumbling,
It's
right?
selfish. It's selfish.
Yeah.
It's people who
Yeah, I
have these
mean,
single family homes in Vancouver who are sitting on $5 million for the property. I'm sorry, but you can have that home for sure. But my kids can't find a place to live, let alone like buy. They can't even find a place to rent.
yeah.
It's like you can't.
That's your op-ed, actually. It stop being selfish. Because that's what it comes down to. Because everybody was freaking out about this rental building going, a bunch of rental buildings actually going in Kitsilano. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Forget
That's
it.
how I lived in Kits. All
It
the
just
places that used to be
yeah.
rentals are now $1 million condos. We need rental buildings so that people of all walks of life, because you know who rents? Surgeons and nurses and, you know,
Mhm.
pilots. And like, it's not just like, ooh, rentals are bad people. There's this
Yeah.
stigma around who might come and rent in your neighborhood.
It's like
Well, I was a
80% of
renter
my
for the
tower is
first
rental.
36 years of my life. When you said 30 years ago, I was like, I was not buying a home 30 years ago. I was
Yeah,
late. I
yeah.
guess
We're
it's
getting up
hard,
there though.
but right, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
23 years ago. But your Yaletown, when you talk about Yaletown doing that live, work, and play, I recall vividly Yaletown being a commercial zone of lofts, and really was not at all residential. Like there was some
Oh no.
quirky bits, but mostly it was
Nightclubs.
like it was clubs and radio
Love affair.
stations and yeah. Oh my God, I loved it. The Gandhi dancer. Stop it. Stop it.
Richards on
Oh my
Richards.
God.
All the best.
Oh, Richards on Richards.
Oh,
Yeah. Anyways,
no.
we digress. Okay.
Yes.
What about, okay, we're moving on from towers. You know what? Let's
Yes.
continue this conversation on radio tomorrow. I'm going to have you on the radio tomorrow and we'll talk about this. We're a Bitcoin city.
Oh my God. I mean, not to mention this is the mayor of Vancouver has said he wants putting a motion forward to council in order for the city to put some of its investments into Bitcoin, which right now is sitting at
Mhm.
$120,000 a coin, I think. You should have bought it when it was 2,000. And I thought it was expensive then.
Did you?
In fact, my business, we launched the first Bitcoin machine in Vancouver. In 2012. It's on Hornby and like somewhere over there. And
Yeah.
so we were still more of a PR company. It's like, and we didn't really even understand what it was. We're pitching it to media, and media were like, "What are you talking about?" And we're like, "We don't know." Anyways,
I don't know. I
well,
remember that. I do, because I was like,
yeah,
it's like money, but it's
they probably
not.
pitched you.
Probably.
But
Probably.
so the mayor's put
Breakfast
his motion
television.
forward. Yeah, exactly. Would have
Uh-huh.
Amanda would have? I think she was
Yeah.
with him. Anyways, the mayor's put his motion forward, which is such a bunch of we're talking about PR spin. What is this? I don't even understand. This is not something really the
He's
city should be.
cool.
It's
He's
cool,
showing you how
man.
cool
Oh
he is. Yeah.
man, it's got so
Yeah.
much swagger. No, this is a national decision. This is something that we have to make sure that we have the proper systems in place as a country.
Yeah.
Blockchain and Bitcoin have a great potential. People don't understand here what's happening in the world. I've talked about this before, I think, about how the
Yeah.
power of the credit card is taking over, credit, that they're taking over control of our money. We used to be able to have
Mhm.
cash, which our
Right.
government paid for. We as taxpayers, there was no interest on having cash. You had $1 was $1. When now you use your credit card, you pay fees, you do this. They're making all these banks are making all this money off our cash. This money, it's our money, and they're making
Yeah.
money off it. So Bitcoin provides a potential, and blockchain, in the simplest terms, of a way for us to get back to a kind of a cash culture where there is no cost to having
Transact.
transact, because the
Yeah.
government, what should happen if the
Hmm.
government understood this federally, is they should be looking at this and as a possible way to create our own currency, our own Bitcoin, our own blockchain currency that Canadians can use, just like we created dollar bills back in the day, that doesn't cost us any money. And it's controlled by the government. This is where government should be going as a way to replace hard currency that we used to rely on. Now we're at the hands of the private sector and controlling our money now. We don't have any
Right.
control of our money anymore, and it's scary. And the government's role is to ensure that the people of our country are properly, or in this case, that he's ahead of himself in some ways. It's cool, but it's the wrong strategy. And maybe he's trying to raise the awareness to say, hey, it's
I
time.
think he probably is. You know what?
Yeah, yeah,
To play devil's advocate a bit,
sure.
because I mean, Ken Sim, the mayor of Vancouver, is an accountant. Like, he is a finance guy before he is most any other thing. And what you just explained there makes all kinds of sense. But we could go back to our original conversation from this particular podcast and talk about, a ban on natural gas and ask, okay, well, Bitcoin uses more electricity than most anything else per
Oh,
unit,
yeah. Mm.
and then don't lose your password, or you can't access your money anymore because it's all online. So if you can't function online at this moment in time, we might rewind to this 50 years from now and be like, remember back then when you said that the Bitcoin wasn't that? There are people that are intimidated by the idea of not being able to hold the money in their hand, where a credit card has given them some stability. I
Yeah.
remember my first online purchase and I was like, I don't know about this. Now I'm like,
Mhm.
buy, buy, buy. I never go in a store,
No,
right?
I know it's true. But now
It's
you think back,
wild.
I think we have to look back. Remember, people used to carry gold around with them, right? It was too
Right.
risky, and so
Yeah.
governments created this thing called money, and they said, and it was tied to the value of the gold currency, right? So there's a
Right.
connection between your cash and gold. Eventually, that went away, and the cash became its own currency. This
Yeah.
is where we're at right now. The currency's gone. Where is the money, and where is its value? Bitcoin's out there doing its thing, growing. All the different coins are doing their thing, but governments need to get their head around the next way as administrators of how our money is controlled, and they're not
Yeah.
there yet. No country right now. I think Brazil is kind of pursuing it, I believe.
They are. South
Yeah,
America is certainly at the forefront of it, but also lots of room for there to be influence of criminal activity, because it's more like playing the stock
right,
market. When did you buy in? What's it
right.
worth now? A
That's
dollar's
why.
not a dollar. But
Yep.
then a dollar's not a dollar, a euro's not a euro. The Canadian dollar is at a 10-year low versus the US dollar versus like what euro. So when you
Mhm.
start to think of it that way, you can see it, but the diversification is lesser so with Bitcoin.
Ha-
It is what it is. And
Yeah,
if
you're
it
right. And
does this, everybody
yeah,
does that. And there are people that can control that so that they can make money. You crash it, you lift it, you crash it, and somebody's making big coin. Sorry. And the greater populace is like at the mercy of it. So I think the
that's right.
regulation piece
It
is
has to
big.
be. Has to
Yeah.
be. So
We're short on time and long on subjects. Let's go to tariffs. Are we going to trade war with the US? Like, what's happening?
well, yeah, we were talking what's pre-show, and it's really this is an issue of the borders more than anything. He's just using a really, really big stick,
Yeah.
and it seems to be
Donald
working
Trump is.
already. Yeah,
Yeah.
Donald Trump's decision, and we briefly touched on it because it had just happened last week. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the stuff I've read now, we think about the decision by, for example, Canada a year ago required that Mexicans have to get visas when they come into Canada. That
Right.
reduced the number of people coming to Canada without a visa from Mexico and then walking across the border. So that,
Right.
cut that down significantly. So there's solutions that we can do that perhaps we can do to fix our borders and make things better and meet the criteria that Trump is seeking. And a lot of it, I think, will just be tweaks to things to make it look so he's not failing because he can't just say because he's used this tool now. Mexico, I think, will have a bigger challenge than we will to
Right.
meet the
And
requirements.
Mexico's the bigger win for him. He's lumping, I think, anyway, I think he's looking at his two borders on incoming President Donald Trump is looking at the two borders uh, internationally on the US and saying, you have to shore up your borders for our America First safety. And is Canada a huge issue in the mind of Donald Trump? I don't think so. But we are easily manipulated by our much more powerful neighbors to the south, right? Like I can
We are we
imagine. I can only imagine what the first minister's meeting was like this week when everybody's like, it's Canada first, Team Canada. I'm like, way to brand it, guys. What are we actually doing? Like,
yeah.
what's the PR move on this? Like, what's the spin on this? Is it, with Curve Communications, like, do you just not start telling people what is made in Canada? It's going to be up to Canadians to buy Canadian because we have gotten bad at it. We are so taken with all of the things that we buy internationally. Like, do we now do more trade with Mexico? Is that more of a central if
I I
for the
I
next 4 years? What does it look like?
I think I don't I think Mexico is in a lot of trouble, but I think
Yeah.
that we have this trade agreement with Mexico, Canada, U.S. that was Trump signed that was actually pushed hard by Mexico and
USMCA.
brought Canada around. But I
Yeah.
think that I have clients who distribute products to states, and we're already talking about what can we do if this hits us for them in March, February. One of the benefits of selling products to America is the Canadian dollar is quite weak, so you get a 25% bump right there. So they're already going,
Hmm.
okay, well, I guess we'll say to Americans who are going to have to pay 25% more for our products, so it doesn't affect us in a way, but of course they'll buy less.
Right.
So we
That's how it
will, yeah. So the things
tariffs
we're talking
actually
about
are
is
worse for
offering,
Americans. Right.
yeah. So
That's the right.
it's a tax. What we'll offer, like we're talking about, if this happens, is you're going to have to offer 25% discounts to meet the match so that Americans keep buying your products. And so that's
But they need BC softwood lumber to build in Texas. Like they need our lumber.
If anybody wants to understand the impact of tariffs, just watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Ferris
Uh,
Bueller's Day Off.
and the scene where he's going, Bueller,
Yep.
he explains tariffs
He's
in that.
explaining tariffs. Tariffs.
Tariffs,
Anyone?
anyone,
Anyone? Are
anyone,
they good? Are no,
did they work?
no,
Yeah,
no.
it's a great scene.
Anyone? Anyone? And they're like,
We all thought it was boring and pointless. Now just watch it and you go, oh my God, he's talking about how tariffs don't work.
John Hughes is a genius. Um, Speaking of taxes,
Huh?
we're getting a break. Are we?
Oh,
We're
GST.
getting a federal.
That certainly, yeah. Well, we touched again. This came out just as we were coming in last week, and people who have spend more money pay more tax, right? So rich people pay more tax on consumable items, not food, because GST is not charged on food. So this is the luxury tax, which is so I guess rich people are getting a little bonus from the prime minister. It's just like all these taxes. We were talking before the show. We're so confused by there's
I'm
a
so
provincial one, there's a
confused.
GST, there's a money coming back, there's this, there's that. What is this really for me, or is this for a headline? What is this about? It's spin.
Is it in government's, whatever government, fill in the blank government, is it in government's best interest to keep the electorate confused?
Yes, that's how politics work.
Right.
Uh,
And on that note, George, you're on the blue sky now.
I blue skied once, whatever you call it, but I have 400 followers already. Amazing. You showed me some
Wow,
tricks.
look at you.
You
You know
showed me
what
some tricks.
I put you in one of those starter packs.
Starter pack.
Gotta do the starter pack. You send out the starter pack and everybody follows you by hitting one button. I don't know. I'm having
I
fun
love
on
it.
the blue sky. I think it's pretty cool. Nobody attacks me there, which is really enjoyable. Then I go back to Twitter and it's all a bunch of people just wanting to fight. And I'm like, okay,
Oh.
okay. Here's a picture of my dog. But you can find us on both. You are on Twitter. You are at George
Underscore.
underscore Affleck, George underscore Affleck. On the blue sky, you're just
Everywhere
George
else.
Affleck. You're just George
Everywhere
Affleck.
else. Everywhere else,
Weird.
I'm George Affleck.
Weird. I'm Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, everywhere at Jody Vance. I'm everywhere. Including right here with George. UnSpunPodcast.com is where you find us. We love you to share it. I've actually shared it with a couple people. I had some really nice individuals who I really appreciate who were throwing headlines at me that were very, very, very steeped in disinformation about local politics. And I just was like, you clearly are not listening to our podcast. And she was like, ooh, send me that podcast. So if you're listening right now and you know who you are, this is what we do. We talk about the real goods, George and I, George Affleck, Jody Vance, signing off on UnSpun Podcast. See you in December, buddy.
See you later.